So with my Hornady AP or auto progressive press, one of the first things that I will need to do is I will need to grease up the dents where the ball bearing seats in as it goes around each station. After I use my press, I normally clean the grease out and then I'll just wipe it down with Hornady One Shot. So here is the shell plate. We will be using the number 32 shell plate to load 45 Colt. Another thing that I like to do is I will press these bearings in just a little bit so that way when we go to throw our powder that we're not throwing powder all over the place on that. So what I do is I will take a brass punch and just barely seat these bearings in to the plate just a little bit more. So I will just use some lithium grease, and what I'm doing is just filling in these holes a little bit with it. And then once I'm finished, I'll just insert the screw plate. Put the washer on and insert the set screw. It's always a good idea to keep a couple of extra springs on hand. Uh, I have a tendency to abuse them. And then you want to make sure that the spring does go down into the track as we do the upstroke going to station 1. So what I will do once I have the grease on, I've tightened down the shell plate, and I just like to run the shell plate a couple of revolutions. That way that the bearings do get greased up. So with the Hornady Auto Progressive Press, you do have 5 holes. So I will refer this to station 1, station 2, station 3, station 4, and station 5. So with station 1, what we will do is we will set up our sizing die and decapping die. I already have my brass decapped and cleaned, so I don't need to set the decapping pin down. I use a universal decapping die on my single stage press, so that's the reason why I'm not decapping. Number 2 station is that we will set up for the case mouth expansion die. Station 3 is for our powder charge. Station 4, I have inserted a powder cop. And a powder cop job is to show you that you are not throwing a double charge. And we'll get a little bit into that later on in the video. Station 5, I will set up for my seating and crimping die. And I will show you how to set up each station. Next, we will go ahead and set up our priming tube. So with the 45 Colt, I know it takes large primers. With the out of Progressive Press, you do get two different tubes. I mark mine with a L and S, representing large primer and small primer. So you will need to insert these two items into your press. Here I'm holding the primer arm and the primer seat for small primers because I've already got mine set up on the press. So all I'm doing is I'm inserting the primer tube, screwing on the safety tube, and we are pretty much set to use large pistol primers on this. Station 1, setting up your sizing decapping die. So I'm just going to insert the sizing die. I want to loosen it up, that way I can make adjustments. So what I will do is, now that I've got the locking mechanism turned about 1/8 of a turn and the die is locked into place, that I want to bring my sizing die up. And what I will do is I will bring the ram up, and I want to now turn my sizing die down till it hits the shell plate. So now I'm starting to feel tension right there. So I will just want to lock my lock ring into place. So I do feel a little bit of cam over on my Progressive Press, and that's okay. And once I have my lock ring tightened down, set in place, I will just take my wrench and just give it a snug turn. That way that the die does not move. So now that we have station 1 set up, I will just take a piece of brass, insert it, and I want to get down and look and verify my timing. I can see that my timing is a little off already. So I will have to make a real quick adjustment on that. Okay, now that I've made my timing adjustment, we're just gonna run the brass case up the sizing die and bring it back down, and it will move over to station 2, which is going to be seating the primer and get ready to expand the case mouth. Now that we have our sizing decapping die set up, I will run the ram up and down just to ensure that the primers are feeding from the tube. So in order to seat the primer into the shell, we're going to push the handle forward just a little bit. So now you can see that our primer now has been seated. So if we go on the upstroke, it will feed another primer and we're ready to prime the next case. Now that we have station 1 set up, we're going to go ahead and set up station 2, which is our case mouth expansion die. So what I will do is I will set a piece of brass into the priming station, and I'm going to bring my ram up, but I want my case mouth expansion die up pretty high. That way I'm not hitting the case with the expansion die. And what I am doing is I am running the case mouth expansion die downward till I feel resistance on it. And I got resistance right there. So I'm just going to bring my lock ring down, but I'm not going to snug it up just yet because we'll have to make some final adjustments on it. So I'll bring my case back, and then I want to turn my case mouth expansion die maybe about 1/8 of a turn. And I will take a projectile and I will seat it into the case mouth to see if we need to make more adjustments or not. Okay, so what I'm going to load in my 45 Colt is a Hornady XTP 250 grain projectile. So we can see that the projectile doesn't quite fit into the case mouth just yet. So I'm just going to turn my case expansion die clockwise about another 1/8 of a turn. Then we'll run the ram up. We'll reseat the projectile, and I'm pretty close. I'm almost there. So now I'll just turn the case mouth expansion die about another 1/8 of a turn. I'll run the ram up into the case expansion mouth die again and recheck. So we're almost there, and we'll give the die another turn. And we'll recheck that. That's pretty good, but I'm just going to give it one more 1/8 of a turn. Setting these presses up, it's kind of tedious work, but once you get it down, you can really crank out some rounds. So I'm good right there. So now I'm going to take my lock ring and I'm going to lock it down. And then what I'll do is I'll take it and give it another good turn so the case mouth expansion die doesn't move out of place. Once we have the case mouth expansion die properly set up, is that we can take the Hornady XTP 250 grain projectile, and it should barely just fit into the case mouth like that. Now that we have our case mouth expansion die properly set up, we're going to move on to the powder charge. Now we're going to set our powder charging arm. So what I'm doing is I've got a piece of brass, and on the upstroke I want to bring it to station 3, and I can see that my arm is all the way up and my arm to bring the upstroke is completely down. So that looks pretty good. I lucked out on adjusting that. So if I was to bring the brass all the way up and my arm stopped like right there, then I would have to run the die down to bring the arm up even more. So with this load that we're going to use 7.1 grain of unique powder. So we're at the point where there's going to be more tedious work involved. So I'm just loading up the powder. And then we will need to adjust our screw to throw 7.1 grain of unique. So how I will adjust is I'll have a case and I'll run it into station 3, throw the powder charge, and then I'm gonna take that powder charge and put it on my scale to see where I'm at. So here my beam scale zeroed out. I lucked out and did not have to make any major adjustments on my screw on the powder drop. So we're good with that. Now we're on to station 4, the powder cop die. So there are O-rings that I have set up to where when I have my powder charge, that the O-ring will come up out of the die. So here I have my white O-ring set up just right outside of the die. So if I had to double charge, this white O-ring and rod would be sticking up higher coming out of the die. So I'm just going to do a double charge. That way you get a better understanding on how that powder cop works. Now look, see how high that came up? That tells me I've got a double charge in the case. So now that I've put the powder back, we're just going to do a single charge. And you can see that the white O-ring is just a little bit above the die. So what I also like to do is, like after I throw a couple of cases into the powder, I'll just go back to my beam scale to double check my powder throw. And then I'll just make some minor adjustments from there. I'm not really too worried about 1/10 of a grain. These are plinking rounds that I'm making. Now we're ready to set up station 5 using our bullet seating and crimping die. Now what I have done different was I want to use my new Hornady click adjust bullet seating micrometer to do this. So our overall length is going to be 1.595 inches. So how we set up the seating and crimping die is I'm going to back the die out a lot, and then what I will do is I will run the ram up, then I'm going to turn our seating crimping die down till I feel some resistance. So I've got resistance right there, and once I feel the resistance, I'm going to back the die out approximately 1 turn. Now with this new bullet seating micrometer, I do have a reference line on the die, and then what I do is I will turn the click adjustment to the H to line up on the line on the die, so that gives me a reference point on my revolutions. So now that I just turned that die out 1 complete revolution, I'm just gonna go ahead and lock down the lock ring, but I'm not gonna over tighten it because we will need to make more adjustments. Now, just keep in mind that as you bring the ram down, you have powder in here, so you don't want to throw your powder into your pan. So I just want to ensure that everything is fitting okay, and now what I will do is we will start seating the projectile, and we want to be 1.595 inches. So you can see that we are a long ways off. So I will turn this die down, and there's 1 complete revolution or 50 clicks. There's 100 clicks, and I'm going to take it back and run it back up through station 5 to seat the projectile down. I'm still a long way off, so I'm going to do another 50 clicks, and we will run it back through. So I just did another 50 clicks. So now we're getting close. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a measurement with my caliper. So right now we're at 1.664, and we need to be at 1.595. So with the new Hornady bullet seating click adjust micrometer, I have to go approximately 69 more clicks clockwise. So I'm going to do another 50, and run our projectile up into the seating die. And then I want to take another measurement. So now we're at 1.613. Actually 1.614. So I'll need to turn my die 19 more clicks. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this clockwise 18 more clicks, because I would rather be a little on the long side than on the short side. So with that 18 click adjustment, it should get us pretty darn close to our 1.595. So I'm at 1.596. So I'll just turn this down one more. And I'll remeasure. So now I'm at 1.595. Now that we have our projectile seated at 1.595, we're going to set the die up to perform the roll crimp. So now setting up the crimp die is that I'm backing this out a little bit. I'm going to run the projectile all the way up, and then I want to bring the die down till I feel resistance. Also, what I've done is I'm going to back out the seating part. That way we're not pushing the projectile down into the case as we're performing our roll crimp. It's always best to double check. So I've got resistance right there. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this about 1/8 of a turn, bring my lock ring down. I'm not going to snug my lock ring up just yet, because I want to see on how my roll crimp is. So I'm looking at it right now. I know you can't see it, but it's a very light roll crimp. So what I will want to do is I want to turn the die down about another 1/8 of a turn. Then we'll just run our projectile there, and that looks pretty good. If I want to put a little bit more of a roll crimp on it, I'm just going to turn the die clockwise down. And at this point, I am happy with the roll crimp. So once we have our roll crimp to where we like it, go ahead and tighten your lock ring down. And we'll have to give it a little snug just to make sure that it doesn't move on you. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the projectile completely back up into the ram. And now I'm going to turn the seating stem clockwise until I feel resistance on the projectile. So I'm right there. So I'm going to back this out maybe 2 clicks. This is the first time that I have used this bullet seating click adjust micrometer. So I don't know what to expect just yet. So we're going to run a piece of brass through. This one here I've already had sized and primed. Now I just ran it through the case mouth expansion die, verifying that my projectile does fit into the case. Now we're going to throw powder. Then I'm going to take this powder charge and I'm going to cross-reference it on my beam scale to make sure that I'm at 7.1, which we look good there. Putting the powder back into the case. Now if we look at our powder cup, you can see that the white O-ring is just coming barely out of the die. So that tells me I don't have a double powder charge. I'm ready to seat the projectile. And on the upstroke, it should seat and crimp, which it did. Now, for the last thing, what I will do is I will measure it. So, I'm at 1.597 on that round. So, I will adjust 2 clicks downward, and I will run another case through. Now I'm at 1.595 where we should be. So I like to run my cases in 4s. So what I will do is on my first case, I'm just going to double check the powder throw to make sure that we're still at 7.1 grain. I'm probably 1/10 of a grain off. So I'm just barely going to adjust that, and I mean, I'm at 7.0 grain on the beam scale. I can live with that because this is a planking round that I'm making for myself. One of the things that I am noticing is that I probably want to set my case expansion die downward a little bit to open up these cases just a little bit more. So I'm going to make this quick adjustment. Right there should be good. Just tightening up my lock ring. So now at this point, if I want, I'm going to run these back through the case expansion die. So if I make an adjustment, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw all the powder back in, verify that all my cases are empty, and we will just start over. Don't have to worry about seating the primers on a few of them. So now I'm just going to get much better on seating the projectile. So now I'll go back and I will check So I'm at 1.5935. So I'm just going to back my die out just one click. And then on my last projectile, I'll just go back and measure again. I am always measuring. And there we're at 1.595. With this video that I put together on the Hornady Auto Progressive Press, I certainly hope it helps you newer reloaders out. Till then, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.